Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today we're jumping right into the fascinating and honestly, sometimes totally unexpected realities of the electric vehicle boom. We hear a lot about the massive macro-level shift toward electric mobility, right? But what does that actually look like on the ground? Well, today we are tracking this whole EV transition from the high-level world of city infrastructure planning all the way down to the highly specific micro-reality of what actually happens when you break down on the side of the highway. It is an incredible journey of shifting tech, so let's hit the road. For a century, the absolute worst feeling on the road was watching that little fuel needle dip below the E line, the classic fear of running out of gas. Today, as we shift powertrains, that fear has pretty much morphed into range anxiety, the dread of running out of battery before you can find a plug. But does the data actually justify this modern panic? Well, as we'll see, the realities of EV adoption, infrastructure, and roadside emergencies are actually quite different from the stories we tell ourselves.
All right, let's kick things off with Act 1, the coming EV surge. So, to really wrap our heads around the sheer speed of this global transition, let's use Wokingham Borough as our microcosm. It's wild. Projections there show that electric vehicles are expected to jump from representing just a tiny 1% of registered vehicles back in 2020 to a massive 33% by the year 2030. That means roughly 40,000 EVs will be on their local roads by the end of the decade. We are not talking about a gradual, decades-long phase-in here. We're looking at a dramatic, rapid transformation of the vehicles in our driveways over just a few short years.
Now, what's really cool is how that skyrocketing adoption actually translates into real-world environmental impact. Wokingham's data shows a projected 12% reduction in carbon emissions from passenger cars. We're seeing emissions dropping from nearly 152,000 tons in 2020 down to roughly 133,000 tons by 2030. It clearly demonstrates why city councils are pushing so hard for this transition, right? Trading internal combustion engines for battery electrics has a profound and measurable impact on local carbon footprints. But getting there? Yeah, that requires an immense amount of preparation.
Which brings us to Act 2, solving the infrastructure gap.
So here's the catch. While early EV adopters usually just charged up in their own private garages, that model just doesn't scale. A massive portion of local residents simply don't have access to off-street parking. According to the Wokingham Strategy Survey data, this huge deficit in public availability directly exacerbates that range anxiety we talked about, and it delays the whole transition. I mean, for people living in apartments or terraced housing, the lack of a reliable public charge point at their destination or near their home is literally the primary barrier to buying an EV.
To keep up with this massive demand and crush that range anxiety, local governments are having to move incredibly fast. Wokingham alone is calculated they're going to need an additional 1,392 fast charging sockets plus 320 rapid charging sockets by the end of the decade. That is over 1,700 new charging points that need to be planned, funded, and connected to a local electrical grid that, frankly, might already be constrained. It's a monumental civic engineering task.
Moving right along to Act 3, mobile charging innovations.
But hey, what if instead of you driving to the infrastructure actually came directly to you? Enter companies like Be Charged EV, who are out there pioneering autonomous mobile charging. We're talking about self-driving units that navigate right to vehicles in need, completely without human intervention. Imagine just requesting a charge through a simple app on your phone and having a little autonomous unit roll right up to your location. It promises to totally revolutionize response times for massive business fleets and individual stranded drivers alike.
The real superpower here is flexibility, plain and simple. High-demand locations, think apartment complexes, huge event venues, commercial buildings, they can use these mobile systems to meet seasonal or even daily fluctuations in demand, and they can do it all without the massive investment, the expensive groundwork, and the absolute permanence of pouring concrete for traditional charging stations. It's a brilliantly adaptable solution to the infrastructure gap.
Okay, let's shift gears to Act 4, the reality of EV breakdowns.
Let's zoom all the way in to the individual driver level for a second. It turns out, EVs don't break down the way gas cars do. They just fail differently. And this brings us to a major myth-busting moment regarding what actually leaves an electric vehicle stranded on the shoulder of the highway. Forget the dramatic Hollywood interpretation where the battery instantly dies and the car just shuts off from 40% to zero. Modern EVs nag you constantly about low charge, and they'll even throttle performance to stretch out your last few miles.
Surprisingly enough, that whole myth about EVs being fragile, yeah, it's completely false. Recent roadside data actually shows that EVs break down significantly less often than traditional gas-powered cars. We are looking at 3.8 breakdowns per 1,000 EVs compared to 9.4 breakdowns per 1,000 internal combustion vehicles. So, when that rare breakdown actually does happen, what's really going wrong?
And here's where it gets almost funny. The incredibly mundane truth behind those calls for help, half of them, literally 50%, are just dead 12-volt batteries. Yep, the exact same small battery that powers the radio in a standard gas car. If it dies, the EV's effectively bricked even if the main high-voltage pack is fully charged. Another 48% of breakdowns, just tire issues, lockouts, or lost keys. And that massive looming fear of genuinely running out of the main traction charge, get this, it accounts for a tiny 1 to 2% of total cases. You are far more likely to get a flat tire than you are to run out of electrons.
Finally, let's get into Act 5, rescuing an electric vehicle.
So while EVs do break down a lot less often, rescuing them is a much more delicate operation. A standard tow truck operator just using a traditional hook and chain, that can do massive damage to an EV. Because they're heavier and lack traditional neutral gears, you absolutely cannot drag them with the driven wheels on the ground. Doing that can overspin the gearboxes and risk 5-figure damage to the motors. No way. You must insist on a flatbed, properly engage the car's specific transport mode, use the dedicated tie-down points to avoid puncturing the battery pack, and keep the whole thing powered down.
To make sure your roadside drama ends up as just a minor anecdote instead of a massive, costly catastrophe, you absolutely need a game plan. Always run through this boring but incredibly essential 10-minute prep checklist before taking a long trip. Check the age of your 12-volt battery. Remember, that tiny little box is the #1 culprit. Inspect your tires, make sure your specific roadside coverage plan guarantees flatbed towing, pack your portable charging cord, and always have a Plan B charger mapped out within 10 to 20 miles of your primary stop.
So, as the world rapidly shifts to electric and our city grids and mobile infrastructure continue to evolve at this blistering pace, we really have to ask ourselves, when millions of new EVs hit the road, are you truly prepared for how they fail differently? Understanding the data, the infrastructure challenges, and the specific quirks of EV ownership is absolutely the best way to ensure you're ready for the future of transportation. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the right questions.